Yeah, sounds good. Where are you located?
London.
Okay, excellent. Well, I'm in the middle of America. I'm in Kansas City. It's wonderful to meet you. Thank you so much for taking a minute out today.
My pleasure. It's great. I've been to Kansas City, Kansas City, Missouri.
Yes.
I have been there. I tell
Okay.
you why I've been there because it's actually touched a little bit on my own kind of story. I was actually there to visit the Nelson Atkins Museum
Okay. Okay.
because I got a background partly in the art world, and we have a collection, and it happens that we had some paintings to the museum there, so I went to see them. Well, so I knew them anyway, but I hadn't been to the museum. So I was actually in Kansas City for about I don't know, 2 days, 3 days, whatever. But I remember one thing very well. When I arrived at the airport, it was very quiet. And I got there mid-afternoon, and I walked out building looking for the taxi rank. I couldn't see a taxi anywhere. I thought myself, maybe I've come out the wrong side. So I went all the way back into the airport, round the other side. No taxis. Anyway, somebody said, yes, I know. There are no taxis. You've got to ring. There's a phone on the wall. And if
Yep.
you want a cab, you phone and they'll come and sit. But there's not enough business there whereby they just sit in the line. It's not like New York or Houston or
Yeah.
something. So yeah, that was quite an introduction. So look, it was very charming. I stayed in a very, very interesting little kind of it was like a bed and breakfast, but it was a very interesting building because it had some kind of historical connection to some of the people who maybe founded the city. It was the one thing I did notice, unfortunately, which is typical of a lot of American cities. And actually, I saw it most recently. I was actually in Oklahoma. It's also wide. It's also
Yes.
somehow disconnected. And
Uh-huh.
I like places which are walkable. You can just walk from one street to the next. And in the Midwest, in general, it's all about scale.
Yeah,
So everything's miles apart. Yeah, you can't
absolutely.
walk really. I mean, probably downtown, you probably can. Otherwise, no. So I just remember it for the simple fact that it's a relatively small city. Well, it's got many things about it, but it's built to a certain scale,
Yeah.
and not actually enough people in it. Everybody's in a car or somehow off the street, and therefore you don't really have the hubbub you would associate with a major metropolis.
Yeah, absolutely. Yo, you're totally correct. And Europe's totally different. Everything's more compact and together, and yeah, it's a different kind of a scene.
Well, you have less room to begin with.
Yeah.
When you have less room, you have to learn to share a bit. In
Yeah.
America, because there's so much space, the
Yep.
idea of sharing with somebody is somehow a slightly strange request, as though somehow you've got your own acre of land, and
Yeah.
I will see you once a week, either in church or in the bar or at the game. But otherwise, I'm not going to have any connection with you day to day.
Yeah.
And I think to myself, in a way, that's a big, big mistake because I think people need to be around other people for the most part.
Yeah.
And we're all social animals, and I think, frankly, the rise of the urban environment reflects that to some extent. People want to be around other people.
Yep.
And I just feel in America, obviously other places as well, but America is quite noticeable where there are just vast expanses of land. It's all forever. I don't know who
Yeah.
actually lives there or owns it, but it just goes on and on and on.
It does.
Yeah, so obviously I do reflect obviously a European sensibility where everything is frankly 2.5 hours away, whichever direction you want to go. And
Yeah.
frankly, I can probably fly to 10 countries within 2 hours.
Yeah.
And of course, because everything is so different and distinctive, you don't have quite the same homogeneity you have in America, where obviously there are particular areas where there's a density of one group of people or another, but you don't have quite the same blend of people when you're outside the major cities.
Yep. For sure. Well, let's get into your life here. And to begin with, I want to start it this way. If I put you in front of a bunch of kids at career day, 12-year-olds, and one of the kids was like, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you answer that child?
The first thing I say to that child, I'm curious. I'm interested in people, ideas, art, food, travel, football, whatever it may be. In a way, when I would say to every small child, every 12-year-old, look up at the world, not down at your phone.
Yeah.
Because when you look down at your phone, you are basically opting out. When you look up, you suddenly embrace freedom, ideas, visual delights, or whatever kind it may be, but you somehow are a bit more self-aware. I think the problem in the way in one world is also with technology, which we can talk about separately. But I think for 12-year-olds, just somehow get up and get out.
Yeah.
I think it's a big problem in the modern world. I think, especially, I read a book a little while ago, which you may or may not know, called The Anxious Generation, written by a fellow called Jonathan Haidt. He's an American psychologist.
Yeah.
It's quite well publicized. Anyway, it was interesting in a way. I mean, look, like a lot of these books, sadly, they're all written by academics. And although it's interesting on a superficial level, it doesn't really flow, right? The way I would want to write. Anyway, he did make one very interesting observation, however, which I didn't appreciate before, which does, in a sense, touch upon your question, Joe. He said that in America in particular, from the 1980s, women enter the workforce for the first time in significant numbers. And what that meant was a lot of kids were basically unsupervised at home. And whereas once upon a time their mother had been around, they were basically confined to quarters. Either you stay in the house, maybe you go in the garden, but you're never just on the property. You know that you're watching television or you're playing computer games. Sometimes you're doing it on your own in your bedroom. And somehow you don't have the experience of day to day life. You know, once on time, your mother was around, and you said, I'm going to see my friend Jimmy 3 streets away on my bike. You're fine, okay, I'll see you in an hour. Or, you know, by the way, pop down to the store, do one, two errands, and we'll see your grandmother at the same time. Somehow, when there was some kind of parental oversight, children were given more scope to explore and to learn about life. And the challenge today is, you know, this sense of confinement whereby you're not actually living your life at all. You're living in a kind of cocoon. It's not real life at all. You know, when you go on that bike ride, for example, maybe you get lost. You've got to ask a stranger for directions, or maybe you fall over, you have a bit of a mishap. Maybe you want to conflicts. But this is all about the building blocks of life. That's how you learn. And I think the notion that kids are basically confined to quarters, and obviously it's escalated because of social media as well, has meant that actually too many 12-year-olds, I dare say, are a little bit scared of the world around them. And the part of the problem, unfortunately, is that of their parents and their teachers and their guardians and so forth, who are equally guilty of the same problem. The difficult thing is obviously, you know, when you're 12, you don't have the cognitive understanding to realize, you know, I've done it for 20 minutes and I'll do something else, get on with my day. When you're a kid, you get trapped in an endless cycle of lists and websites and Instagram, whatever it may be. It's all fine to a point, but not all the time. And I think if you don't know how to navigate the simple boundaries of life, it puts you, in my view, at a disadvantage.
What did you want to be when you were 12 years old? What was your dream life, dream gig?
It was a long time ago, to be honest with you. And if I did think something, I probably thought something different the week after. I couldn't say I had one kind of burning ambition to do something in particular. I was always, I would say, looking back, I was a curious kid. I was interested. I read a lot of things. I just somehow I had a explorer's instinct. Not very radical. I mean, just the idea of just going to a different movie theater next week, or just somehow, you know, taking a chance on a friend I didn't know. Yeah, small things. But I wouldn't say I had one burning ambition in mind when I was a kid.
So talk to me a little bit about the building blocks that have made you curious. Talk to me a little bit about offline art, kind of how your world has come together.
Well, my worlds come together through a multiplicity of means. I mean, obviously, offline is, I suppose, in some ways central to my life only because it does reflect my broader philosophy of the world at large. And offline really came about initially many years ago. I used to read very well, and I still read now, but I used to read newspapers, magazines, periodicals, and I'd often tear things out to read later in more depth. And I think myself interesting. That's put that to one side. You know, Joe would like that, or Tom would like, you know, something else. And I suddenly ask off in a very random kind of way. No obvious pattern, just little things. Anyway, I did it for probably a dozen or 15 people, just 10 things I thought were interesting and they should read. One day I met one of my friends for a coffee, gave him some things to read, and he just wondered out loud. You know, I did it for other people. He said, "What's everybody else getting?" That was interesting. Why don't I just bring together a bunch of 12, 15 people, a bit more maybe, people either recipients or kind of disposed to the idea, have supper somewhere together, share a few articles, see where it goes. And it was a great success. And I realized two things. The first thing was that most people love to share their insight or their experience or wisdom, whatever, in whatever capacity that may be. The other thing also is that food is a great leveler. And when you eat with people, you learn a great deal about them. Anyway, I did this dinner and it went very well. I was asked to do another one, which I probably did a few months later. It just grew, just word of mouth. I must be honest, I never actually counted. Over 15 years, I must have done 50, 60 dinners. I'm not even sure, private, corporate. But the whole premise was basically if you bring together a completely disparate bunch of people, no business dimension to it at all, you will find that people have far more points of convergence rather than divergence.
Yeah.
People are very quick somehow to label themselves one another. They're not qualified. It's not appropriate. Never done it before. A million different reasons. And I didn't really care about that kind of thing. And I would invite typically 30, 35 people for dinner. Some of them I knew very well. Some I've never seen before in my life, which is also good. And from all backgrounds. So people were involved in business, in tech, in fashion, in politics, in art, people running charities, people did anything and everything. You could be an academic, you could be retired. I didn't care what people did. And I didn't really care how old or young they were. I wasn't interested in their gender, their status, money. No concern to me at all. But the one thing I did care about very much was that they were givers. And by that I mean that they were curious, they were open, they were interested in the lives of other people. And I would tell a bunch of stories over the evening, reflecting on the offline philosophy. Offline really, at its core, is a celebration of the virtues of randomness and serendipity. Yeah, when you go somewhere, Joe, and you've been there 100 times before, and you know me there, you know the drill, you tend to zone out a little bit. When you're not quite sure who you're talking to and where the conversation may go, you pay a bit more attention.
Yeah.
Your antennae become a bit more sensitive. That's all. Now, I was very, very kind of, how do I describe it best? I had a very fluid approach whereby I didn't really worry terribly much about things going wrong. Which did put me on like the different path of people who I know organising events are very, very concerned. It's all scrupulously well run and it's professional and it's outstanding. Everything has its place. I don't really worry with that kind of thing. People said, how long did it go on? I said, it basically started, they all showed up, and they finished when they went home, and that was about it. And that was great. And I had some great people. Some people were very, very successful, some people starting out in life. But I mixed them all together, different tables. And to give you an idea of the spectrum, I can tell you that the age range from youngest to oldest out offline was 70 years. In other words, the youngest person who came was 16, the oldest person who ever came was 86. Now, the 16-year-old, that was the daughter of a friend of mine. I hadn't seen her mother, it's just post COVID. I hadn't seen her mother for a while, and she was coming to our dinner, and we went for coffee, and one of her daughters was nearby and popped by. We were chatting about the dinner. Quite a bright, self-aware 16-year-old. She was quite curious about it. I said, maybe I'll come. She said, I'd love to come. I said, okay, great. Well, one thing very clear, I make this clear in front of your mother right now. If you come, understand this. Your mother will not be sitting next to you. Your mother won't be on the same table. She'll be over there, the other side of the room. Welcome to the adult world.
Yeah.
You'll learn to listen carefully. You'll ask, interesting questions. You'll pay more attention. Just watch how people behave. You don't do anything. They'll be obviously sympathetic like you're a 16-year-old girl. But within that, now you are taking a step up. Anyway, she had a great time. As to her mother, I do. By contrast, I do corporate dinners as well. One of my corporate clients was an organization called Brand South Africa. And Brand South Africa is basically the marketing arm of the South African government. And I curated a number of dinners for them in London. Anyway, on one particular occasion, I was doing a dinner for them, and a friend of mine, who didn't actually know very well at the time, all the tech world, said to me, he was coming. He said, "Can I bring someone?" I said, "Sure." And my first instinct was, well, what's her name? What's the story? Am I like bearing on the table plan and so forth? It's like a pregnant pause. I said, "What is it?" He said, "No, it's not what you think." I said, "What is it?" He said, "Can I bring my dad?" I said, "Your dad? How old's your dad?" He said, "My dad's 86. He's as bright as a button. Hey, you'd love it." I said, "Yeah, same. Wheel him in. Great, wonderful. Love to have him there." And his father had a really interesting backstory. His father, to give you a bit of context, had won a silver medal in the 1958 Commonwealth Games in swimming. He gave up competitive swimming in the early 60s, I believe. He then became an operatic tenor, performed at Grindbourne, Covent Garden, various other major venues. He then got involved in media and journalism, and he ended up creating one of the very first um, agencies for music and sport management in the very early 70s. And a really fascinating guy.
Yeah.
To give you an idea of his reach and he, I know, was at the, you probably don't follow it in America so much, but the inaugural Rugby World Cup final in South Africa, I remember, he was there in 1992 as the personal guest of both F.W. de Klerk and Nelson Mandela, with whom he was friends. He was on the Olympic Committee. He was a really interesting guy. Yeah. Now, the reason I'm telling this story in a way is because there may have been many that's not appropriate. 16-year-old girl, bit of a depth, it might be a bit awkward, uncomfortable. Each 6-year-old, well, they probably can't follow what's going on. They probably get locked in the bathroom. Yeah, no, great. And what I'm saying really in a nutshell is I think people in the modern world are far more concerned with what may go wrong than may right. I'm much more into what goes right. I accept things go wrong, that's life. But I don't agonize over the small stuff. I mean, A to with B, I can put B on the table, not the end of the world. Don't like the wine, we'll get a different bottle. I don't have to put together a detailed contingency plan. It's crazy, but people do. And the problem is, you see, going back to the point about this book, The Anxious Generation, people have become more and more discussed. And it's made worse in turn by the technology because everything is very immediate, everything's very visual, everybody's comparing themselves and comparing with one another. In a way, the fact that everything's been scrutinized or subject to peer review is crazy. And people become very, very concerned somehow if they don't do the right thing, they may be subject to some kind of consequence. So you say something out of turn, not only will we berate you in front of the entire crowd, you will be marched off the premises by security, it'll be in the papers, or the internet. No, nobody cares. Nobody cares, believe me. So saying out of turn, okay, fine, next time go better. But the problem in a way is the modern world is very, very quick to censure and to judge. And I think it means that the people lose confidence. They don't really quite understand how to navigate even something as simple as greeting somebody. Do I shake their hand? Do I hug them? Do I kiss? If I start, do I do it on the left and the right? Okay, it's crazy. People don't quite know what to do, what's appropriate anymore. Anyway, so offline, really going back a step, is a gathering of people, and I didn't really have any kind of master plan other than the fact that I just knew if you bring together 30 odd people in a room, lovely setting, good food, not too long, not too late, not too expensive, they will come and they will make their own music. So I was there as a kind of glorified prop, just to sort of set the scene, share a few stories, and let them get on with it. And that's pretty much what happened. I did it for years. And I must be honest, I did obviously until COVID, but obviously it was a bit of a complication. Stopped doing it for 2 years, I think it was. And then I started again in May of 22, did 5 more dinners that year. And we were then going away. So my partner, we were actually a big trip. We went to South America for 2 months. And I decided that if I felt motivated to carry on with the dinners when we got back, great. If I didn't feel motivated, that was also great. I had enough. It's all I had enough. I got weary of work on the back end, the planning, the organisation, following up, making sure people are confirmed, make sure they paid. And then the worst thing of all, you may have experienced in some different context, people phoning you up 5:30 on the day saying, "Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention, I'm on a keto diet." I mean, give me a break. I mean, this kind of craziness. Anyway, I just want to say, offline formula I know is great. I hosted numerous dinners. They always sold out. Great people came. Some people I became very friendly with, and obviously people form relationships beyond that. But there was no business dimension to it. You could be
Yeah.
sitting there, frankly. I mean, I'll tell you an interesting story. So I did a dinner for another corporate company called Salesforce. They're a big technology company. Anyway,
Yeah.
and they wanted to get close to their clientele without selling anything. I said, okay, I'll curate a dinner. Anyway, very interesting clientele. I remember Goldman Sachs and Nielsen Research and GBC and a whole bunch of people, some small companies as well. But I got to know one of their companies very, very well. And he, at the time, was in fact the marketing director for The Economist, the magazine. And he said to me that I didn't anyway offline, but they invited me. I happened to be free that evening, and I just said, yeah, it came along. He said, you've got to understand, I go to a lot of events populated by the great and the good, and very interesting and stimulating, but they are very much, they follow a very particular path. And he said, essentially, the same people and the same conversation year after year. And, has its virtues, but, it's a bit limited. And okay, here, he said, I showed up at the offline dinner, mingling with people beforehand. I eventually got to my table. He said, I sat down. I discovered that he said, the fellow on my left, he said, he was running a hedge fund. The lady to my right, he said, she was a piano teacher. The guy opposite me, outside the table, he was running a dog walking business. He said, nobody cared what I did at The Economist. It was just how much money I made, who I met, and my stages. What kind of man I was, what term you are. He loved it. He actually loved it so much, he came back independently, brought other people with him. So it's just interesting to me how people become very, very constrained by convention,
Yeah.
a terrible nagging fear that if you somehow deviate from the prescribed path, something terrible will happen. There'll be some thunderbolt from the heavens, and you'll be turned into a pillar of salt. I mean, it's crazy, but there we go. There we go.
I love it. So you obviously have a lot of exuberance and curiosity in your life. Who's been your inspirational force? Who's been your hero in your life?
I think what a hero. I was actually asked this a little while ago by somebody. I mean, I don't know about a hero. I mean, certainly nobody ever hero. Gosh, a hero somehow. You say a hero, I'm thinking back to some kind of outstanding historical figure. You know, and somebody who really, sort of, struck nations aside and instituted all kinds of extraordinary developments. I don't think I had one mentor or some kind of guiding force. I think for a long time, if I'm honest with you, I didn't really have any clear direction. I mean, I obviously worked, I did think reasonably competently, but I didn't ever feel there was some kind of life force guiding me. I mean, I suppose if I was looking at any one person who was, by dint of his example and capabilities, probably my father. But my father is similar but quite different to me. So I wouldn't have said that I was necessarily looking to be a mini me. I mean, I didn't want to go into his business, for example. And
Yeah.
although subsequently we got closer for a variety of reasons, I wouldn't have thought he was somehow my kind of foundational, anchor. Is it someone he was the one I went to? No, I didn't. I worked out myself, or I consulted certain people I knew or good friends, but I wouldn't say it was any one person. Certainly, I was growing up.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. As an orchestrator of social events, getting people together, if you could get into a time machine and go back in time and go to one glorious social gathering, one glorious party with maybe famous people or something noted that's in history, where would you love to have been to like walk around the room and meet people?
That's a very good question. I think that there are many periods. If I had to pick one, I think I'd probably say one of the kind of the great Renaissance courts. Because if you're looking at the world in the 16th century, where suddenly everything explodes,
Yeah.
knowledge of science and literature and art and music, I mean, incredible people, huge tumult and all kinds of inventions. I mean, that I think would be incredible. If you're at the court and you are just in the company of the finest people of their kind at that time, yeah, I mean that would be terrific. I mean, obviously, I think it would be very interesting, certainly, to be, for example, in I don't know, in this sort of entourage or something, maybe a Roman emperor.
Yeah.
Be quite interesting, quite fun. But I think I want to be with people who somehow are making this happen. Either great conversation or very provocative ideas, or maybe they're very beautiful, or maybe anything you like. But somehow you want to feel as yes, like you're being almost overstimulated. There's so much going on. I don't have some yearning to somehow be standing, I know, on the edge of the cliff admiring that. I mean, that's great. Yeah, for 5 minutes. But I don't want to stand there thinking I've got some kind of elemental experience. No, I don't. I love around people, and I'm very curious about the way people behave, the way they sit, the way they eat, the way they move their hair, whatever it may be. And the great virtue of being in that kind of, whether a Renaissance court or anywhere else, there's a lot going on. There's a
Yeah.
lot to absorb. And I like that. And I think the problem in the modern world is that people don't do it enough.
Yeah.
People, I mean, I read something very interesting a little while ago, which is slightly tangential, but interesting is kind of an insight of the way people behave. A restaurant, I think it was in America somewhere, the guy got interviewed. Business, he said, business is fantastic, actually. They're doing really, really well, in fact, better than ever. He said, the only thing is, it never comes to my restaurant anymore.
Yeah.
Everybody gets food delivered at home. And he said, I've got a trail of people who are coming in on the bike and so on. And he said, because most people would actually rather just sit on the sofa in their pajamas watching television and not interact with anybody at all.
Yeah.
So he said, my business is great. But the truth of the matter is, the business I once had, which is really about the people and the environment, is gone.
Yeah. Wow. So let me ask you this. If you had a dream tonight and went into your childhood home and walked up to your bedroom at the age of 12 or 13, and you had a picture book, a coffee table book of your life, and you gave it to that version of you, and they were thumbing through it and looked up confused, and you said, that's what my life turned out to be. Would that young version of you believe it?
No, no. I, I don't think that the 12-year-old me probably had the maturity to recognize what was possible. In other words, you got to go back, 50 odd years. The world was a much slower place.
Yeah.
You were slightly more confined. You just travel was complicated. Yeah, once upon a time, you want to go somewhere in the Far East, it's 3 flights. And even then, you've got to make sure there's a flight on a given day. Now, when do you want to go, sir? I mean, everything's available all the time. And I just think somehow that the, 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 the dial has moved. And I think in some ways it's very difficult to move it back, at least without a lot of kicking and screaming. I don't know, about 50 years, what would I have said? I probably said, who's that balding bloke in the glasses? Oh my God, it's me. Yeah, I mean, yeah, is there something else? It's familiar, but it's unfamiliar, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
So I'm sure there probably were things which I thought, probably did give me some ideas or inspiration, or I was excited by it. I mean, look, at 12 years of age, as I made the point before, you're still learning about life. I mean, you don't
yeah,
really know what's out. And certainly when I was 12, I mean, obviously there was no technology. I mean, I had a conversation about this a little while ago now. My kids are all small. I mean, it's must be like 20 odd years ago, probably. I had a conversation, and we obviously here in the UK, we have Sky TV. It's a very big satellite broadcaster. Obviously, multiple channels. Obviously, now there's multiple channels, multiple platforms. Anyway, we were watching TV one day, and my children were incredulous at the idea that I had somehow managed to navigate my entire childhood with only 3 television channels. We had BBC One, we had BBC Two, and we had nothing called ITV. Subsequently, there was something called Channel 4. But that was basically it.
yep,
I didn't have the heart to tell them that when I started watching television, Joe, it was in black and white. I mean,
yep.
what kind of crazy idea is that? It's interesting how your perception changes, of course, in terms of your frame of reference. I can only say that from my own point of view, I don't think I really had any kind of, because I think in a way for me, the world was a big place. And I knew that there was a lot for me to explore, but I didn't really have the tools with which to do it. So I used to read a lot, and I asked questions and so forth. But I don't know that some, if I look back, no, I don't think I did. I mean, if I'm being completely honest with you, I
Yeah,
mean, maybe it made a cameo appearance, so 1 week in 6, but ordinarily, no. I think actually, no, I was 12 years of age. I mean, what was I doing at 12 years of age? I was being a 12-year-old boy.
that's it.
I don't know that I somehow had some kind of, long-term plan.
Yeah,
Looking back now, no, I don't think so. I don't think so. I mean, was it really? Oh, I don't know. I don't think it was.
yeah.
No.
So let me ask you this. Of everything that you've accomplished, and more importantly, evolved to at this point in your life, what are you ultimately the proudest of?
How to start? Well, I would say that I've been governed by two basic principles for myself, which on the whole, I think I have subscribed to with a few aberrations, and that's basically to be a good and kind person. If you start on that basis alone, forget everything else, that does provide you with a kind of platform. Because if you're a good person, you're a kind of person, you do tend to encourage reciprocity, and there's a tendency of people in other respects to pay it forward. I think the other thing I would say is my kids, my kids, I think, are all. I mean, so me, I don't know how you got kids or how old. My kids are all grown up, and I'm looking at them. I think myself, God, that's incredible. I mean, I can't do that. We were talking about it, frankly. And they're all thriving. They're all doing great, albeit they're all a bit scattered because two of my kids live abroad. So I don't see them as a collective very often, sadly. But that's again the modern world. But they are both. No, sorry, I've got 4 of them. But they're all good and kind, and they are all thriving in their own way. And I think they've got their head screwed on the right way, and they're all making their mark in a particular direction. I think that in terms of what else I have done, I think that in a way the offline philosophy, which is really a kind of culmination of much else, which I probably shared over the years, and obviously the dinners were the physical manifestation, but obviously the book is just another means of expression. But I think that did encapsulate much of what actually I'd sought to achieve, what I thought was actually important, or I set great store by. But again, you see, I'm not sure there's somehow a kind of like a manifesto running through my life. I mean, a lot of what I've done has been a little bit spontaneous. I took risks in terms of people and places where I went and things I did, and fortunately, I came out the other side. Now, not saying I got all the answers by any means, but I think I was probably on the whole more inclined to take a risk than most people I knew. And I think that is something which I've also, it's usually, see, my kids are all, they all lean in creative directions. None of my kids are engineers. None of my kids are bankers. I mean, and the funny was, I did think to myself a while ago, how did that happen?
Yeah.
Because I never thought of myself as being a very creative person. I mean, originally I worked on the stock market. I went there from school and I worked there for, I don't know, 10 years, 12 years, whatever, different companies. And I got involved in a company which became a major aggregator of auction data, which is still going, quite a bit bigger now. And I got involved with some family stuff and we have art and so forth. But I never really thought of myself as being a creative person. And I met somebody I knew, but I got to know something much better. A fellow who had been at my school. He was about a year or two older than me, and because of all the usual teenage hierarchy, I didn't really know him at the time, but we got to meet subsequently. He had originally, he really, I think he'd been school captain. He was on the first 15. He won all the prize. Yeah, a very accomplished guy. Went to Cambridge, and then he got involved in TV and film. He became a film producer, produced a film called Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It was quite an iconic and sort of cult movie. A bunch of other stuff. He got involved in consulting and media for that. Anyway, put that to one side. He was a guy who I had great respect for in terms of what he achieved, what he'd done, by comparison with me, for sure. And we met one day. He was one of the people originally who actually got the bundles of articles. So we went back quite some time. He said something to the effect, I treasure every time I see you. I look forward to it with real, anticipation and what you've got to say and your ideas and your wisdom. I thought, what? You talking to me? I was only over my shoulder. In a way, for me, that was I would say something of a revelation.
Yeah.
I was probably then, how old was I then? I would say probably my late 30s, say probably 25 years ago. That was a bit of a kind of an epiphany for me, where somebody who I had high regard for, he produced on many levels, and saying to me, who really hadn't done in my own mind a great deal, certainly on that level, I'm sitting here and I'm just lapping it all up. When
Yeah.
can I see you again? Oh my God. And that was a bit of a watershed moment for me.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. If anyone wants to get involved with offline, they want to learn more, they want to get involved, any of the good business in your world, where do they go?
Well, the first thing they buy the book. The book is out. It's called Leave Your Phone at the Door. And that really, in a nutshell, is a kind of a look, it's basically an agglomeration of thoughts, ideas, experiences, mishaps, observations, wherever. Part of it's about just the background to offline. And then there's another section all around codes of conduct, how you behave, boundaries of acceptability, civics, kindness, a bunch of other stuff, all again related by me in terms of my own experiences and so forth. And then the last bit actually is a bit longer. It's actually about travel and what I learned along the way, and to what extent with the offline philosophy actually held me in good stead. Because again, I went to fortunately a number of places, and certain things didn't go necessarily according to plan. But that's also a good thing. The idea that you go through life and it's all filleted for you. Otherwise all the bones have got the head. You've got that little thing just there, and that is it. It's all been done for you. We'll even feed you if you ask us nicely. I don't want to live my life like that. So for me, the book really is just about recognizing that if you demonstrate an open mind and a generosity of spirit, you will be rewarded on the upside.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the book is available. You get it on Amazon. You can get it on Barnes and Noble. I'm not sure, frankly, but it's available. And it's all been selling pretty well. I did a lot of podcasts and stuff with the press. But for me, anyway, so others going on in my life, it wasn't somehow the central issue.
Yeah.
So I can tell you for sure, the message behind the book will be, if not more relevant, a year from now or 2 years from now. So
Yeah.
the one thing I want to mention, which is important, I think, in the context of the book, is I'm not anti-technology by any means. Technology is great. The problem is that people become so reliant upon it that the human functionality we're all born with has always been discarded.
Yeah.
That's a problem. that's really. I mean, innovation is great. The fact we're having a conversation right now on Zoom
Yeah,
tells you, you know, everything you need to know. I'm not opposed to it, but I am opposed to the idea somehow that the technology is automatically superior to
yeah.
everything that's gone before, because of course it's not. So human engagement and living your life is, in my opinion, incredibly important. It's such a fractious world where there's so many polarized views and people are so intemperate and so rude or so snarky or so unreasonable. You need to find ways to break down barriers. And I'm a big believer in that. I think, you know, the idea that you've got some, I don't know, captain of industry sitting next to, I don't know, a gardener, and on the other side you've got some bright young intern, or then you've got somebody who's maybe an academic or something. I mean, I don't care, but you'll find something that's like all four of them support the same football team, for example. Now, it's very easy, or they've all got a passion for, I don't know, Indonesian food. It doesn't matter again. You know, there are all kinds of points of convergence, and all too often people ignore them because they are so worried about what may go wrong. Now,